Okay, I think we're ready to start. So, ladies and gentlemen, both here present and online, heartily very welcome to the session which is entitled Nordic Energy Aviation, which is hosted by Nordic Energy Research in the Nordic Pavilion here at COP28. So, I'm Astrid, I work for Nordic Energy Research, and I will try to guide you through this quite short session, but hopefully enlightening session, on electric aviation. So, Nordic Energy Research, my institution, is an institution under the auspices of Nordic Council of Ministers, and our main focus is to enable cooperation on sustainable energy research. We have a very large, almost 1,000 projects, it feels like, on energy and sustainable development. If you want to read more about this, there's a leaflet under here, and you can find the link to our webpage where you can read more about our projects. Okay, so one of the projects that we have is electric aviation, because energy plays a crucial role in driving this transition and also addressing the energy supplies. In collaboration with our sister organization, Nordregio, which is the Nordic pronunciation of it, and Nordic Council of Ministers, we've emphasized this aspect with the project examining the impact of electric aircrafts in the Nordic region. And why the Nordic region? Well, it's because the Nordic region is a great place to start, not only because we're extremely into and also very much politically committed to make transport more sustainable, but it's also because of our geography. If you look at a topographical map of the Nordics, you will see that we are very few people, but located very far away from each other. So electric aviation could be a very good solution for the Nordic countries. We're soon going to hear more about electric aviation from Nordregio, but I think it's time to introduce our first speaker. Hello, Mr. Jeppe Bruus. Jeppe Bruus is the Minister of Taxation in Denmark, and Denmark has been a leader in implementing climate mitigation policies. You have a master's in political science from the University of Copenhagen, and you're an elected member of the Danish Parliament for the Social Democratic Party. I've heard that during your term, a broad majority in the Danish Parliament has agreed on carbon tax on industry and distance-based tax in the transport sector. And you are going to enlighten us, I hope, on Denmark's proposed green aviation strategy, which includes a passenger tax to fund eco-friendly air travel by 2025, which is only 2 years away, and to achieve a complete domestic green air travel by 2030. So that will be interesting to see. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And it's a great honor to be here and at the COP. It's my first time at the COP, and it's actually very inspiring. I was appointed Minister of Taxation 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. And after just a week in office, we had a Danish expert group on doing carbon pricing on Danish industries presenting their report. And so the first deal I was part of making, a proposal for Parliament, a deal with Parliament last summer, a green tax reform, introducing carbon pricing on industries. And we early on also did a reform driving for more electric cars. We have had, as you mentioned, carbon pricing on heavy trucks. And at the moment we are negotiating a passenger tax or aviation tax. And in the spring we are working on negotiating carbon pricing or CO2 tax on the Danish agricultural sector. So driving the green transition in Denmark is done both by subsidies, but also by using tax instruments, carbon pricing. And we see that as an important tool in the tax mix also to drive the green transition. And so at the same time, we are having very ambitious goals of doing offshore wind in North Sea, also a little bit in the East Sea. And with the plan that we have put forward and the tenders that are being prepared, we would actually produce enough wind energy by offshore, a little bit onshore also, to electrify using a lot of electricity that would actually be able to heat up and use in 14 million households. And there's obviously a lot more than we have in Denmark. And so by 2030, we expect to be exporter of electricity. And of course, that wind should also be used in the transportation sector, maybe also by flying a little bit, but definitely by the use of power to X to produce fuels that are renewable, both hydrogen that we hope to export also to Germany and other places, but also to do renewable fuels. So we are pushing to create a lot of supply of electricity and an infrastructure that will actually generate the possibility to produce renewable fuels. And so now we have introduced an aviation tax, also actually to create both a demand for the renewable fuels for transportation, also by flying. And as you mentioned, Astrid, that we have the goal that almost in 2025 we'll have the first trip domestic, you're welcome, the first domestic route that are completely renewable. And by 2030 we aim for that all domestic flying within Denmark will be on renewable fuels. Obviously, it's an ambitious goal since it's only on the test at the moment. If you can fly 100% renewables, as I'm sure you know, the first flight were taking off not long ago from Britain to the US, and so we will use some of the revenue from the aviation tax to actually both do the tender on the domestic route in 25, but also to actually speed up the production of renewable fuels towards aviation. And so it will decrease a little bit on the traveling, but the main goal is actually to be able to keep flying when there's a use for it or a need for it, but in a way where it's sustainable. And therefore, in line with other climate policies we do in Denmark, we hope to show that we could use Denmark as a test case and be part of accelerating not only our own production, but also tools and technologies and knowledge that we can export. And that's, I think, is extremely important. Obviously, the domestic flying in Denmark is only a drop in the ocean comes to pollution, but it is a huge challenge actually for all of us to make sure that we can fly with renewables in the future. And as you know, in 25, the European Union recently agreed that to promote sustainable aviation fuels, and that 2% of the overall fuel supplied at the EU airports must be sustainable by 25. And in 2050, it should be 70%. And so we hope that we, 20 years earlier in Denmark, could be in a case where we have all domestic flying in Denmark on 100% renewable fuels. So that's our goal. And we are, of course, we have a goal and we want to realize it as well, or to implement it. And that's what we are negotiating with Parliament at the moment. So I'm looking forward to this session and also obviously to answer some questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think I have. Thank you so much. If I have time for one question, just sometimes when you launch initiatives that has to do with tax, they're not always super well received. How has this initiative been received in Denmark, both by the industry and in the public?
Well, actually, it's a good question. You know, here at the COP, I'm attending a lot of panel discussions and bilateral debates. There's a lot of interesting carbon pricing. And why do I start there? Because, you know, in most countries, you would lose elections. if you were running with a message that would actually raise taxes. In Denmark, you could lose the election in 2019 if you were not ambitious enough with solutions on the climate crisis. And so therefore it's a different case, but it's also proof of concept that you can do carbon pricing. And what we do in Denmark is that we redistribute the revenue to the sectors, but also to those companies in those areas where they have the hardest time of transforming their production to renewables. And we also do the carrots, we also do subsidies. We created a great green fund by removing some taxation of pensions. And therefore, I'm not saying that Danish companies were all in favor of carbon pricing, but it has created a situation where those companies that invest most and also drive the green transition and renewables in their own production will have a competitive advantage to those companies who doesn't invest. It's very simple, actually. If you are not polluting, you're not paying the tax.
Yep.
So it gives you a competitive advantage. And so, sector for sector, we are driving these principles, that it should be going back to the sector, it should be advancing the green transition, and it should be a test case that can show technologies that we would like to export. The transportation sector in the area of aviation in Denmark are not too happy about the level that we have introduced about the aviation tax.
Yeah.
And also a debate about how do we use revenues from this taxation. But I guess that it's at a level where, in Sweden you have the same, and the level that we have introduced or proposed the aviation tax is comparable to what you do in Sweden and Germany and other neighboring countries. So it's just unique. And actually, it's when you look at what's going on at the European level and what we did with the CO2 tax last summer, it adds on to be driving the incentive to actually use renewables quite a lot, also in the aviation or in flying. So we hope that will have a positive effect, even though we're well aware that it also generates a lot of questions, and that we have to do a very close cooperation with the sector also when we're going to implement this over the coming years.
Yeah, I have like 50 more questions, but I don't have time for that. We'll have to move on. We don't have so much time. So the Nordic Electric Aviation is not really a reality yet. I think the first flight is set to be in 2028, and my colleague Kevin has already bought his tickets, but there's no date yet, so we don't really know. However, there are plans, and we're mapping out the different solutions. And in that, we'll have to look at the impacts and the opportunities. And I actually know someone who has done that. It's Nordregio, our sister organization. So up next is a pre-recorded session from Nordregio, which we have collaborated with on 2 projects when it comes to energy and electric aviations. So Nordregio is a research institution which is specialized in regional development across the Nordic sectors. And they also have some pioneering projects that are related to electric aviation. And the aim is almost like the tax, to reduce the carbon emissions and to enhance environmental sustainable air travel in the Nordic countries, which is something that we're focusing on a lot in the Nordics. So in this video, we're going to hear from Rebecca Kaviccia and Hilma Salonen, who are studying the effects of electric aviation in the Nordic countries.
Welcome to the presentation on electric aviation and the effect on the Nordic region. This is a project commissioned by the Nordic Council of Ministers and led by Nordregio. Nordregio is an international research center for regional development and planning. Project partners are University of Akureyri in Iceland and Nordic Energy Research. My name is Rebecca Cavicchia and I'm the project leader.
And my name is Hilma Salonen and I'm also working on the project.
So, to start, this project poses very big, crucial and important questions. So, why electric aviation? Why the Nordic regions? And why now? Why electric aviation? As we all know, the climate crisis is posing very big challenges and the urgent need to develop more sustainable transport solutions. In addition, electric aviation well answers to the Nordic Council of Ministers' vision about making the Nordic region more sustainable. Nordic regions, why Nordic regions? These are the perfect context to explore a topic as electric aviation because of their geographical characteristics, for the presence of many remote areas with issues of accessibility, because of their geographical obstacles, and because all the Nordic countries are very much politically committed to make transport solutions more sustainable. And why now? Even though electric aviation is not yet a reality, it's very important to explore already now what can be the impacts, the opportunities or the challenges that electric aviation might create in the Nordic countries, as well as understanding which routes, which areas might benefit the most from electric aviation. So, in order to do that, the project poses this question, this crucial question that drives the whole project, which is how could electric aviation impact Nordic regions? We are answering this question making two main points. One is about regional accessibility. So how electric aviation can actually contribute to improve the accessibility, especially of remote areas. And the second point is about understanding all those socioeconomic, technological, environmental, and legal factors that might affect the way electric aviation might impact Nordic regions in the future. So, to address the first point about regional accessibility, we developed an accessibility study. This is mainly a quantitative study where we first map, as you can see in this map, all the airports in the Nordic countries. In this map, airports have been classified according to whether they are located in urban or rural areas, and all the possible connections between these airports have been highlighted. As you can see, we focused in particular on urban-rural connections because the point of the project is mainly to understand the possible benefits for remote areas. And we focused on routes of maximum 200 kilometers because this is the maximum length that the model of electric plane we are using for this project can cross. So to further narrow down the selection of the routes, the next step in our study has been to assess the travel time, the possible travel time to cross these routes with electric aviation. We compared this time with the time that would be needed to cross these routes by car or with public transport. So the final selection is for all those routes where the travel time with electric aviation would be 1.5 times less than the travel time by car or public transport. This step led to the selection of 203 urban-rural routes. But we went further with the process, adding also some other methodology.
Yes, because the industry is very fastly developing and it's also very new. It is clear that there is a lot of invisible factors that are not in the statistics yet, or maybe some kind of minor drivers that will activate in the near future. So then to really consider their possible impact, we had to go deeper into the regions, talk with the local experts in these focus group interviews, and find out the whole complexity of the situation. So we went with 5 case studies representing the 5 Nordic countries, which you can see here. And you can see here that they have the same characteristics as this overall map. A lot of the possible routes would go across a waterway because that often saves a lot of time. And then also a lot of the routes are connecting an urban center with a more rural or maybe a more remote region. And then with these people there, we discussed the scenario of 10 years. So how would that impact these whole regions and their development, and what kind of drivers there could be? We can now take a look at the individual case studies. So in Denmark, we discussed the route between the capital of Copenhagen and the island of Bornholm, which is interesting, especially from the point of view of regional goals for sustainability. In Bornholm, there is this project of a green energy island, of having the whole island completely emission-free. And of course, there electric aviation would be a very important pathway towards this ambitious goal. But then there's also more practical benefits. A lot of people travel from Bornholm to Copenhagen, for example, to visit a hospital. So then having a more flexible route would be a considerable benefit. With Finland then, we had a triangle represented by 3 northern cities of Kuusamo, Kajaani and Oulu. And there we talked more regional development from a variety of perspectives again. A lot to have to do with kind of supporting the local businesses that really depend on having better accessibility, a reliable accessibility to allow for business travel and so on, but also from the point of view of tourism, having a more interconnected region with the help of electric aviation could help with the kind of broadening the viewpoints of tourism, having more options for the local entrepreneurs. With Iceland again, the case was a bit specific compared to the others, because it's the only one that connects 2 urban centers, the 2 major cities of Iceland, the capital of Reykjavik with the city of Akureyri. And the reason why it would be an interesting case is that because Iceland as a whole is such a remote island, full of remote places that are very hard to access, even by road, that having this possibility of having cheaper flights, more frequent flights, would be very essential to a lot of the villages there, to connections to all different parts of the island, and having a better access to the services of the capital region, since many of the services are only in the capital region. And then Norway is again a very specific case, because there's so many of these very remote fjords, distant islands, that for local people, like with people living in the Lofoten Islands, taking a plane is almost like taking a bus when they want to reach mainland. And for this reason, Norway has this very ambitious goal of having all of its domestic flights, which they have one of the highest numbers in the whole of Europe, to have them all become electric by the year of 2040. So for this reason, it's already a huge political driver to cut down the emissions because of the number of domestic flights that they have. And of course, in addition, it would be a way to overcome these major geographical obstacles. Then with Sweden again, it's the only case that connects 2 countries. The city of Skellefteå with the Finnish city of Oulu. They are both large industrial centers, and this would be a way of integrating 2 labor markets. Both are, especially with Skellefteå, that is increasing rapidly, both in population and in business activities. It would be a way to attract more skilled workers and kind of like having a more flexible labor market, in addition of having better accessibility, better services. And for this reason, in northern Sweden, there is already major private and public support for this case, which constitutes a major driver. So we see that in all of these 5 cases, there are these national specificities, but of course also a lot of factors that they have in common, and also a lot of open questions that are common that need to be solved. One of the drivers that could activate in the future is, for example, regulations. They would have to become a bit more up-to-date, a bit more flexible to really reflect the possible future situation of electric aviation, both at the national and local level. And then, of course, the political commitment towards sustainable aviation has to be there so that there is this clear signal that this is the aim, this is what we're going towards. The open questions, the possible challenges have to do with the ticket price, which was mentioned maybe the most during the focus group interviews, is a very practical question. Could it be a little bit cheaper or would it be more expensive? It's still a little bit up in the air. Of course, social acceptability of new technology is always a little bit of a barrier, at least during the first few years of a new technology. And then in the end, as mentioned, will there be enough incentives? Who will make the very costly first investments? Is there, for example, public support? Or will there be a private actor that could act as a driver during this phase? So these things are still left to be known.
So what is the main message emerging by the study, by the case studies and all the analysis we did? It is that electric aviation can offer great opportunities on several levels. First of all, for regional development by creating, for example, new socioeconomic networks. For regional accessibility by increasing the accessibility of remote areas and establishing new connections, both within the same countries as well as cross-country connections. And has also, finally, great potential to foster better integration across all the Nordic countries. More results from the project will come because the project will end in December 2024. So we invite you to follow us on our project website on nordregio.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome to the presentation on electric aviation and the effect on the Nordic region. This is a project commissioned by...
So quite interesting, I think, especially probably the part with aviation being almost as common as a bus in the north of Norway. If you look at the map, there are nothing but obstacles when it comes to transportation. But it seems as though collaboration between the Nordic countries is very important. Do you find that this is something that is difficult or very easy to do?
Well, it's easy to agree that it's important.
Yes.
But just from a practical point of view, we have the Øresunds region, the greater Copenhagen area between Denmark and Malmö and the south of Sweden. Everyone can agree that it's very practical and useful to have a close cooperation. But as a Minister of Taxation, it's actually a bit difficult sometimes to overwin the obstacles. So I guess that's a classic example. I thought it was a very interesting presentation. You could argue actually that in Denmark the distances are so short that it would actually be more visible to take the train than and a flight. Personally, I think it's we need to move forward with getting use of both and make sure that you can fly with renewables. Except for Bornholm, because there's the water again between, so it's a bit difficult with the train all the way.
Yeah.
But even then, you could actually have a route. Anyway, getting back to the Nordic cooperation, obviously it's very important. As I said, the level of aviation tax that we introduced, we also, of course, were aware what were the level in Sweden. It's part of the conversation, it's part of the argument. And so it's just another example that it's obviously very important.
Yeah, not only I think domestically, but I was in a meeting last week, had to go from Bergen to Aarhus, which is, you can travel by land, but it's not that far, but with the train, 16 days or something. So we'll have to conclude. I just want to thank you so much, and also a great thank you to Nordregio. I just want to say that let's use these innovative solutions to look into the future and try to propel the air travel towards greater sustainability. And probably I'm thinking that this is just the start and that we have so much interesting to look forward to. So thank you so much and have a nice flight home.